Congratulations, you've just died. And not just any kind of death. This is a beautiful medieval death. Messy, sudden, undocumented. You didn't get a last meal. You didn't get forgiveness. But hey, you got this. A linen shroud, a pit in the mud, and the delicate soundtrack of flies buzzing around your half-open mouth. Your body is still warm. But the soul? Well, if such a thing exists, it's already hovering, somewhere between your eyebrows and the low-hanging smoke of incense no one bothered to light. Because no one expected your death today. Or maybe no one cared. You died in the year 1348, and statistically speaking, so did everyone else. The air stinks of vinegar, rose water, and rotting flesh. It's plague season, which means the priests are out of Latin. They've buried so many that the rites have become noise. You were not given a name, just a number, scratched in haste on a wax tablet by a monk who hasn't slept since Tuesday. Is it Tuesday? Hard to tell. You've lost the ability to blink. You died alone. No dramatic parting words. No one to hold your hand. Just a faint echo of your own breath slipping away in a cold room lit by a candle that burned out 20 minutes ago. There's no autopsy. No flowers. No one asking, how did he go? Because in 1348, everyone knows how you went. You coughed. Then you bled. Then you died. Your skin is pale, but not serene. It's the color of spoiled milk, touched with a bluish tint around the lips, like someone tried to kiss you after drinking ink. There's a sore on your neck, about the size of a pigeon egg. It burst yesterday. But here's the best part. They didn't bury you out of love. They buried you out of urgency. You are now more dangerous dead than you ever were alive. The grave is shallow, 2 feet deep at most, because the sexton is tired and the ground is stiff with frost. There are others down there with you. Bones, buttons, a child doll with one glass eye. She doesn't blink either. You haven't been bathed. Your hair is matted, your fingernails blackened with dirt. One shoe is missing. The other has a hole in it. You were wearing it when you died. Now it's a relic. Your mouth is open. Not screaming, not smiling. Just open. An invitation. For worms. Or worse. You feel the first thread pierce your lower lip. Of course, you don't really feel it. Dead nerves don't scream. But something in you remembers pain. A cold, ancient memory like ice under the skin. The thread is coarse. Animal sinew. Cheap. The monk sews quickly, efficiently, muttering a prayer more out of fear than faith. They're not sealing your mouth for modesty. No, this is about containment. Because they believe, truly, that the dead can speak. And you, with your reputation, you might speak curses in the afterlife. Or worse, truths. And truth is dangerous in 1348. Far more than plague. Somewhere nearby, a bell rings for another soul. You're not special anymore. You're a statistic, a burden, a hush name in the back of a ledger. And now, a body with its mouth sewn shut, so it won't whisper blasphemy in the dark. Sleep well. Or don't. No one's listening anyway. Not anymore. He stands above your body now, the priest. Robes soaked with the sweat of too many burials, not enough prayers. His voice is hoarse, not from grief, he's long past that, but from repetition. The kind of repetition that scrubs meaning off of words like sandpaper to bone. He reads the rites from memory now. The book is too wet with tears that aren't his. Not for you, of course. No one here knew you. You're a line in a ledger, a problem in a pile. A future ghost to avoid at night. The priest glances down at your face, what's left of it. Your eyes are half shut, half open. That unsettling in-between stare the dead favor. You've been stitched, poorly, thread through lip and cheek. It puckers at the corners. Your jaw is crooked, your tongue invisible. He's grateful for that. He doesn't know your name. He didn't ask. He won't ask. Because names imply stories, and stories imply souls, and souls Souls require care, time, mercy, luxury items, all of them. So instead, he says the only name he knows, Frater Incognitus, brother unknown, generic, efficient, disposable, a one-size-fits-all salvation. There are 4 more bodies behind yours. 2 men, 1 girl, 1, hard to tell, already stiff, already swaddled. He doesn't have time to mourn you. He barely has time to look. He tosses a splash of holy water across your chest. Most of it lands on the dirt. Some hits your lips. It trickles into the stitches and hangs there like dew on barbed wire. He doesn't notice. He mumbles something about rest, peace, God's will. Then he coughs, a dry, rattling cough. And suddenly, your body doesn't seem like the only corpse in the room. He drops the cross, picks it back up, whispers an apology, not to you, but to whatever watches. Your mouth is silent, of course, but your absence hums. A bell rings in the distance. Again, another death, another stranger, another name no one will ask for. The priest steps back, brushes dirt from his knees. He will forget your face by sundown. He will forget your mouth was ever open. He will forget that you once cursed the heavens loud enough for the bishop to flinch. But he won't forget the silence, because that's what stays. Not your name, not your sins, just the weight of a body that never begged for mercy. You're lowered now, gently, almost kindly, into a grave that smells of damp wool and regret. And still, no one knows your name. Not the priest, not the grave digger, not the wind that rustles the dry grass above you. But the earth remembers. It knows exactly who you are, and it's listening. Your mouth is shut now, but once it wasn't. Once it roared, not with songs, not with psalms, not with sweet nothings, but with curses, heavy, clawed, blood-warm curses that crawled out of your throat like animals in heat. Curses with teeth, curses with memories. They say your tongue was sharp enough to slice linen. Not literally, of course, but a barmaid once dropped a jug of ale when you spoke her mother's name aloud, a name no one had mentioned in 15 years. You had a talent for words, not the gentle kind, the surgical kind, the kind that undressed men's lies and left their secrets shivering in the mud. You spoke, and things happened. Goats stopped giving milk. Candles blew out without wind. Priests forgot their Latin. And you smiled. Not because you were evil. No, but because it felt good to make something true. In a world full of plagued doctors and indulgences and nobles hoarding salt as if it were gold. Your tongue was the only honest thing you had. It wasn't noble. It wasn't holy. It was yours. You used it recklessly, poetically, with the precision of a butcher gutting a confession. They feared you for it. Your neighbors, the old women who clutched rosemary when you passed, the bishop who rubbed ash on his palms every time your name was mentioned. You made men kneel without touching them. You made women dream of fire. You made the sky feel closer somehow, heavier when you spoke like God was listening. But power like that doesn't stay tolerated for long. Not in 1348. Not when the fields are dry and the wells are poisoned, and someone must always be blamed. They said your tongue carried the devil's breath. They said your words caused miscarriages. They said you hexed the baker's son so he couldn't speak except in riddles. He still does, apparently. They say a lot of things, but the truth is simpler. You made people see, and seeing is terrifying, so they held you down, knees on your chest, a rag in your mouth, to keep your tongue from dancing as they prepared the needle. Some cried, not for you, but because it was ugly work, necessary but ugly, like slaughtering a dog that's gone mad. The monk who sewed you was young. He had freckles and shaky hands. Your tongue thrashed once. Try to spell one last word against the roof of your mouth, but they didn't let you finish. And now it lies dormant, quiet, soft against your teeth like a drowned worm. But it remembers. It remembers the bishop's name, the noblewoman's affair, the secret carved beneath the church altar. It remembers everything, and it waits, not for justice, not for resurrection, but for the day the stitches rot, for the thread to snap, for the silence to end. Because your tongue, your cursed, clever, sacred tongue, is a weapon, and weapons never forget what they were forged for. The needle was already waiting before your body was cold. No ceremony, no hesitation, just the slow metallic shimmer of a curved hook catching a sliver of candlelight in its eye. The kind of candlelight that flickers when someone lies in a church. You weren't just dead, you were dangerous. And in 1348, the line between danger and damnation was thinner than a rosary thread soaked in guilt. Your body had to be dealt with quickly, but not carelessly. Because what if your tongue kept moving? What if your mouth, that nest of profanities and heresies, remained open under the earth? What if the devil had a back door? They couldn't take that risk. So they began to sew. You don't get an anesthetic. You don't get a warning. You get a needle. You get twine, coarse, waxed, and pulled straight from the belt of a trembling friar who hasn't eaten in 2 days and still smells like the last plague house he anointed. He starts at the center of your lower lip, pushes through. Skin yields like parchment soaked in blood. There's a pop, resistance, and then a wet softness that swallows the thread like flesh swallowing consequence. He pulls the stitch tight. Your jaw jumps. Not from pain. Pain is for the living. For memory. Muscle. Reflex. The echo of all the words you ever spat vibrating like a ghost violin against your teeth. Another stitch. Then another. They don't speak while they do it. They don't need to. The ritual speaks for itself. The silent horror of it all. The idea that speech itself can survive death. That the tongue might wag in the coffin, whispering foul truths into the soil, until the roots of nearby trees grow crooked with your anger. Better to shut it now, before the devil hears, before God hears. Some believed the mouth was the gate of the soul. Others thought it was the sewer of sin. You were both, a sermon and a cesspit. By the fourth stitch, the skin begins to split. Your lips weren't made for this. They tear like soft fruit, ripe, purple, already leaking the final remnants of your will. By the sixth, the blood stops. Not because the wound is sealed, but because the body has given up trying. They bind a jaw shut now. Cloth, soaked in vinegar and superstition, wrapped tightly around the head, over and over again, so that even if the thread loosens, the mouth stays closed. Closed like a tomb. Closed like a secret. And when they're done, they step back and look at you, not with reverence, but with relief. You've been silenced. Not redeemed. Not forgiven. Just contained. A problem solved with a needle. A sinner sewn like a sack of barley. They leave your body cooling on the stone. They'll bury you soon. But for now, they wait. To see if you twitch. To see if the stitches hold. And under it all, beneath the quiet, beneath the linen, beneath the blood and the ritual and the superstition, your tongue lies still. Still, but not surrendered. Because sin doesn't die. It just waits for someone to unpick the thread. This is not the first time they've done it. The stitching, the binding, the whispered prayers that sound more like apologies than absolution. This is not a punishment reserved for you alone. You've joined an ancient fraternity now. Unwilling, voiceless, nameless. The silent dead. They are scattered across time, across kingdoms, across empires that have already turned to dust and dreams. Their mouths sealed tight, not with forgiveness, but with fear. You were not stitched because they hated you. You were stitched because they believed in you. Believed that the dead can speak. That what's buried doesn't stay buried. That a mouth, even rotting and cold, can still conjure shadows. This belief, half folklore, half theology, half desperation, was older than your village, older than the church, older than Latin itself. They say in the hills of Sardinia, the dead were gagged with stones. Not to weigh them down, no, to stop them from moaning secrets into the roots of fig trees. The fruit tasted too bitter otherwise. In the Black Forest, they used wax. Melted, dripped into the mouths of thieves and whores before burial. The wax hardened like judgment, a kiss from a candle before the dirt came. And somewhere in the mountains of Anatolia, long before your name ever echoed off cathedral walls, they packed mouths with ash. Ash from burnt scripture, just in case the dead decided to rewrite the story on the way out. All rituals, all versions of the same quiet terror. That silence must be secured, not assumed. Because a corpse with an open mouth is more than a body. It's a question. What does it want to say? What do we forget to ask? What if the tongue remembers something the living want to forget? You were dangerous precisely because you were dead. Alive, you could be reasoned with. You could be punished. You could be exiled. But now, you answer no one. And that's terrifying, because in your death, you became something other. Not a man, not a soul, not quite a ghost, but a vessel, for guilt, for memory, for prophecy. So they perform the ritual, the stitching, the binding, the oil on the eyelids, the dust pressed into your palms. The incense waved not for you, but at you, like smoke might keep you from rising. And the prayer? It's not a blessing. It's a lock. May this soul find rest, and may its voice be stilled. They chant it 3 times, not for holiness, for security. You're not being welcomed into paradise. You're being contained. You're sealed like a dangerous letter. You're buried like a spell gone wrong. You're mourned like a warning. And the villagers, those who whispered behind cracked shutters and clutched their children close, they come to watch, not out of sorrow, but curiosity. They want to see if your mouth stays shut, because somewhere deep in their bones, they've heard the stories. Stories of the silent dead, the ones who unstitched themselves with the force of a name, the ones who hummed beneath the ground, the ones who taught worms to whisper. They know what you were, and now they want to be sure you're no longer becoming. The grave is waiting, but so is your tongue, coiled behind that thread, silent, but never still. It wasn't always thread. Long before they mastered the neat cruelty of needle and sinew, they used thorns, not metaphorical ones, not poetic, symbolic, church-sanctioned ones. Actual thorns, from a hedge behind the cemetery wall. Thick, black, barbed like broken promises. They broke them off with their bare hands, nails bleeding, breath ragged, and they pushed them into the mouths of the condemned. Not one, not 2, a crown's worth, a bouquet of punishment. You, of course, are too modern to understand what that felt like. But imagine this, your tongue curling around the dry kiss of a thorn, its point nestling against your palate, scraping softly as you try to swallow. Your lips split not from words, but from the attempt to move. The blood pools, but it has nowhere to go. So it sits in your throat, warm, metallic, holy. You can't spit. You can't scream. You can only drown, mouthful by mouthful, on your own silence. They called it purification, as if God was a gardener, and your mouth a vine that needed pruning. You didn't get thorns, technically. No, yours came later. Thread, vinegar, a few trembling stitches. But the thorn ritual echoes in every puncture of your lips. It lives in the tension of your locked jaw. It whispers in the ache that stretches from the corners of your mouth to the hinges of your skull. You can feel it, can't you? Even now, embalmed in earth, cheeks stiff with rigor, mouth frozen in the shape of regret. You feel them pressing inward. The phantom thorns. You never deserved them. Or maybe you did. Depends on who you ask. The baker's wife would swear on her rosary that your tongue spoiled milk just by proximity. The priest said you cursed without even speaking. And the children? They said you whistled without moving your lips. So what's a few thorns for a man who makes the air shiver? But this goes deeper than folklore. In ancient Judea, rebel corpses were crowned with thorns not just to punish, but to mock, to transform them, to say, you were a danger, now you are decoration. And in some corners of the world, quiet, hidden, old as bone, they still whisper about thorn mouths. Not ghosts, not spirits, but mouths, alone, detached, buried in jars, mouths filled with thorns that murmur when the moon is wrong. Some believe your mouth has become one of them. You lie beneath the earth, not a man, not quite a memory, but a chamber of secrets too sharp to swallow. The roots above you curl away, as if unwilling to taste what grows in your skull. And still, despite the thread, despite the cloth, despite the centuries of silence layered like dust on a cathedral pew, the thorns remain. You feel them, not as pain, but as presence. Each one a sentence never spoken, each one a truth too heavy for heaven. You are silent, but not harmless. You are sealed, but not empty. And somewhere far above, a child pricks their finger on a hedge and cries out, not from pain, but from recognition. They told you it would be fire, molten lakes, rivers of flame, demons with pitchforks, and very poor skincare. You expected to wake up in a furnace, expected heat, sweat, screaming. But no, not here. Here, hell is cold. Not the chill of snow, not the comfort of a winter hearth. No, this is the kind of cold that crawls. Wet, fungal, like the breath of a crypt that's been sealed too long. You open your eyes, metaphorically of course. They've already glazed over, and you see nothing. Not darkness, nothing. A void so total it presses against your chest like a damp pillow. Your first thought isn't pain, it's dampness. Your robe is soaked through. The linen that once wrapped your corpse clings now like regret. Cold, sagging, full of mold. And your feet? Bare, numb, slick with something that isn't quite water. Not blood, not mud, something thicker. You move through the space. Though space is a generous term. This is a tunnel, a hallway, a throat. The walls drip. The air hums like an organ with a dying lung. No flames here, only fog. Heavy, sour. It tastes like sulfur and spoiled honey. And the others? They're here too. You don't see them. You hear them. Breath behind you when there's no body. Footsteps that echo in every direction. Lips that don't part, whispering things that your stitched mouth still understands. They've been here longer. Some for centuries. Some for moments. Time doesn't move here, it slouches. And the rules? Different now. You don't scream in this hell. You shiver. You don't burn. You drip. There's no punishment. Just presence. No fire. Only moisture. You realize, slowly, that the worst torment isn't agony. It's repetition. Endless, looping, wet sameness. You hear a bell. Not from above. From inside. As if someone has hung a church in your chest and rung it with a fingernail. It tolls once, then silence, then again. Each time a reminder that even in death, you are still being measured, still being watched. This hell is not angry. It is indifferent, which is worse. You see them, finally. Figures in the fog, drifting, some sewn like you, some with mouths wide open, frozen mid-word, tongues black with mildew. They do not speak, not because they can't, but because it no longer matters. Even accursed grow tired of hearing themselves echo. You move past them. You do not say hello. Your stitches hold. You should be grateful, because here, those who speak, those who dare to curse or cry or call out, are dragged deeper, down to the dry hell, the one with mirrors and chairs and ears. You've heard of it. They whisper about it in the upper moistness. But for now, you remain here, cold, shivering, listening to the way silence chews the air. And you think, if you could, that you'd rather have fire. At least fire would mean someone cares. You've probably wondered by now, why the stitching? Why the thread? Why the ceremony of silence? After all, the dead are supposed to be harmless, aren't they? But no, not you. Not the ones like you. The ones who died loud. Who died with unfinished sentences curled like vines around their tongues. You were silenced for the same reason libraries burn. Because words are dangerous. You see, the living tell themselves a lie. That death is a wall. Final. Implacable. Quiet. But the dead know it's a window. And some windows are cracked. Sometimes at night, a whisper seeps through. It stirs curtains. It spoils milk. It makes widows sit up in bed and stare at nothing. You are one of those whispers. A warning. A thorn. A word that should have stayed unspoken, but refused to die quietly. And so, the living had to shut your mouth for you. They did it out of fear, yes, but also logic. You must understand, the dead have nothing left to lose. They don't bargain. They don't flatter. They just reveal. And what they reveal is never clean. The dead remember everything. The infidelities, the bribes, the secrets that no one dared write down because ink fades but the dead do not. Imagine what would happen if the dead could speak. What would the bishop confess if the man he poisoned began to hum again under the chapel floorboards? What would the merchants say if the woman he sold in his salt mines started to mutter in her sleep from beneath the ground? What would the town do if you, stubborn, cursed, brilliant you, opened your mouth and spoke the truth with a tongue no longer bound by fear? They couldn't take the risk. That's why they sewed you. Not because of superstition, not because of ritual, but because they knew what you knew. Words never die. They rot. They ferment. They grow teeth in the dark. And when they finally return, they don't come back gently. They arrive like floodwaters, like plague, like prophecy. You once told a man that his land would turn against him. He laughed. 3 winters later, the earth split. His son disappeared in the chasm. The well never filled again. Coincidence? That's what they said, what they had to say. But they never looked you in the eye again. So now here you are, mouth sewn, tongue tamed, truth contained, or so they think. But the dead still dream. And dreaming is just another form of speaking. You've begun to feel it, haven't you? The vibration. Low, persistent, at the roof of your mouth. A hum that has no source. That's your memory trying to escape, trying to wriggle its way out of your teeth. And when it does, when it finally drills through the thread, through the linen, through the dirt, it won't be a word. It'll be a revelation. So they were right in the end. The dead shouldn't speak, because when they do, nothing stays buried. Not sin, not shame, not even God. It wasn't dramatic. Not thunder from the sky. Not flames erupting from your fingertips. No one grew boils. No cows died mid-milk. It was just a word. One word, spoken in the wrong place at the wrong time, in a voice just loud enough to remind the town that silence is a choice. And you didn't make it. Some say the curse was directed at the bishop. Others say it was meant for the wine. A few still whisper that it wasn't a curse at all. Just a truth too naked to survive in daylight. You said it during Mass. Not loudly. Not theatrically. You didn't stand up, arms outstretched, possessed by spirits or vengeance. You just said it. Softly. Like one might hum a lullaby. Like the truth had been sitting on your tongue for so long it had to leave or rot. Rotis peccati said it in sanguine. The sin sits rotting in blood. That's what you said. That's what the bishop heard. That's what everyone heard, because it rang through the nave like a bell struck from inside the skull. And then silence. Even the candles flickered, as if afraid to be seen illuminating you. The bishop dropped his chalice. Wine spilled down his vestments like a wound. The acolyte stared at you with the kind of fear usually reserved for beasts that speak in dreams. They dragged you out, of course. No trial, no explanation. The curse was enough. They said you blasphemed. They said your tongue was touched by the devil. They said you were inviting damnation into the house of God. But those were all excuses. The truth was simpler. You reminded them that the wine was bought with blood, that the bishop's vineyard used to belong to a widow who vanished, that the altar had cracks in it, long ones, where stolen gold had once been hidden before the renovations. You reminded them that beneath the incense, beneath the Latin, beneath the holy water and the robes, there were bodies, old ones, forgotten, unforgiven, and that's what made it a curse. Not the words themselves, but what they made visible. Your curse didn't kill anyone, but it made them look, and what they saw was enough to terrify them. So they branded you, marked your door, refused you bread. Children spat when you passed. You were no longer man. You were mouth, and they feared you not for what you'd done, but for what you might still say. So when you died, suddenly, suspiciously, alone in a room with no windows, they came quickly, not with prayers, not with sorrow, with thread, with vinegar, with fire in their eyes. They didn't mourn you. They secured you. They buried you like a live wire, like a jar of gunpowder, like a spell still smoldering in the chest of a man-shaped box. And somewhere, deep below the church, beneath the stones slick with forgotten blood, your words still hum. Not loud, not yet, but enough. Enough to keep the priest from sleeping. Enough to make the bishop drink more than usual. Enough to keep the children from playing near your grave, even in summer. Because curses, like seeds, don't die when buried. They just wait. You weren't buried. You were shoved into earth that didn't want you, into a grave that had already tasted too many men like you, men with dangerous tongues and inconvenient memories. The soil wasn't soft. It cracked like old skin when the spade broke through. And when they dropped you in, you landed like meat. No grace, no dignity, just the heavy, wet sound of a body coming to rest where no one would ever visit. Your mouth, already stitched, was packed with soil, not by design, but by gravity, by the weight of the world saying, "Stay down." The dirt seeped in slowly, through the gaps between the thread, into the wet corners of your lips, onto your tongue, which curled like a dead worm, swallowed by mud. You taste it still, don't you? Even in death. Even without nerves, without breath. Your mind remembers the grit, how it scraped across your teeth, how it filled every crevice of your mouth, until the difference between flesh and soil became irrelevant. You try to unclench your jaw. You can't. It's locked, welded with fear, with rigor, with the aftertaste of iron and regret. There's metal in your mouth, not a coin. Not the kind placed by loved ones for Karen's fee. This metal came from your own bones. A tooth split when they slammed your jaw shut, when they tied the cloth too tight. The root cracked, the blood froze, and now your jaw holds itself in place like a rusted hinge. No one will open it again. Not easily, not without tools. And, in the strange, slow-burning lucidity that comes after death, that you're now a vault, a sealed tomb within a tomb, a reliquary for your own silence. Above you, the gravedigger coughs, wipes his nose on the sleeve of a coat too thin for the frost. He mutters something about your eyes, how they didn't close right, how they watched him while he worked. He drops the last shovel of dirt over your face. It lands with a muted thud. You feel in your skull, because that's what you are now. A network of bones and memory. No breath, no voice, just marrow and mud. You were buried fast. They didn't bless the ground. They didn't light a candle. They didn't tell your story. They just filled the hole, walked away, and let the cold finish the conversation. But the earth? It isn't still. It shifts. It pulses. It settles around you like a living thing. Worms thread through your ribs. Roots press against your spine. Moisture seeps into your ears, until even hearing becomes an act of drowning. And yet, you are aware of the weight, of the cold, of the dirt in your teeth, and the iron in your jaw, and the silence swelling behind your sealed lips like a storm that forgot how to rain. You are buried, but not gone, not extinguished, just contained. And someday, when the thread decays, and the bones split, and the grave forgets to hold you, you will speak again, and what you say will taste of blood and soil. Somewhere, far from your grave, in a room with no windows and too many locks, there's a shelf. It leans slightly to the left, as if it's tired of its own secrets. The wood is warped, soft with mildew, carved with the hesitant scratches of someone who never finished learning how to write. And on this shelf, lined up like holy relics or butcher's trophies, are jars, not labeled, not sealed, just there, waiting. Inside them, tongues, not pickled, not preserved, just suspended in brine or oil or something older. Some are gray, some have turned green, some look almost fresh, and one, just one, still twitches. They don't belong to animals. They were taken from the mouths of men and women, and once a child too young to curse but old enough to know. You wonder from your grave if yours will be next, if they'll come for you, dig through the mud and the regret and the stitches, cut you open like a fruit gone soft, pluck your tongue like a prayer they were promised, because your tongue is still valuable. It's not sacred. It's not damned. It's worse. It's honest. And honest tongues are dangerous. They have a tendency to speak even when detached. There's a monk. He doesn't sleep. Not really. He tends a shelf, dusts it, feeds the jar small drops of wine on feast days. He listens too. He puts his ear to the glass. And sometimes when the night is long and the wind is sulking, he hears murmurs. Not words, not yet, but syllables, consonants like broken teeth, vowels that stretch too long to be natural. The tongues are remembering themselves, and yours, if it's not already among them, is whispering from beneath the earth, calling out in a dialect older than Latin, older than myth, a language made of hunger. They say one of the tongues spoke once, clearly, sharply, said a name. The monk went blind that night, not instantly, but slowly, as if the sound had scratched his eyes from the inside out. They keep that jar at the back now, wrapped in cloth, chained, whispered about only during storms. You might wonder, why keep them all? Why not burn them? Bury them? Forget? But that's not how people work. We keep what frightens us. We catalog our sins. We store them in jars so we can point at them and say, look, it's contained. It can't hurt us now, but it can, because even in silence, a tongue remembers how to speak. Even in death, a tongue remembers who to curse. And even in a jar, surrounded by salt and superstition, a tongue, your tongue, is still waiting. Not for freedom, not for redemption, just for the right ear. You were buried days ago, maybe weeks. Hard to tell from down here, where the light doesn't change. And time isn't a straight line, but a slow, rotting spiral. And yet, your body remembers. It shouldn't by any natural law. Nerves should have stopped. Muscles should have slackened. The marrow should have gone still. But you were never a man ruled by natural law, were you? Your mouth is sealed, but beneath the cloth, the thread, the damp collapse of soil, your jaw begins to twitch. At first, it's nothing. A tremble, a tickle in the hinge, like something crawling just beneath the bone. But then, a shift, a clench, a memory rising through the nerves like a flood through catacombs. You remember speaking, Not what you said. Memory is cruel that way. But how it felt. The press of air behind your teeth. The heat of breath shaping meaning. The precise, violent elegance of a consonant sliced into the world like a blade. Your body remembers that. And it wants to do it again. The thread groans. Not from strain yet, but from resistance. Like it knows this silence is not eternal. Like it doubts. You feel your tongue swell. Not from rot, though that too has begun its work, but from purpose, from need. It presses against the thread like a prisoner testing the bars. Not today, but soon. Elsewhere in your corpse, things begin to move. Your fingers curl slightly, almost imperceptibly, in their shroud. Your toes arch. Your shoulders roll forward in the grave like you're trying to sit up, even though you have no spine for it anymore. Because death, for you, is not an ending. It's a rehearsal. You were buried without ceremony, without candles, without coin, without even your name. But your body doesn't need a name to remember who it was. And what it was. A weapon. A warning. A man who once spoke so clearly he made priests forget their prayers. You didn't ask to rise. You didn't crave revenge. There is no blood feud dragging you back. No, what pulls you upward is memory. The memory of motion, of language, of sound. Because silence, true silence, doesn't belong in a mouth like yours. And your body knows it. There's a moment, brief, subtle, buried beneath a foot of dirt, when your lips part just slightly. A thread creaks, then tightens. Not yet, but close. You're not breathing. You are not dreaming. But something in your bones remembers how to do both. The rats know it. They don't come near your grave. The worms feel it. They've begun to reroute their tunnels. The earth? She listens. She hums against your ribs with a sound that almost feels like a lullaby. Almost. Your flesh peels. Your jaw tightens. Your tongue begins to press forward. The body remembers. And soon, the voice will follow. You are not alone down here. Not in the dark. Not in the damp. Not in the silence that coats your skin like mildew on old stone. They move around you, these others. Not touching, not speaking, but present. Oh, very present. The weight of them settles in the dirt like second thoughts. Ghosts, not the kind that rattle chains or flicker behind curtains. These are quieter, more deliberate. They have learned the discipline of stillness. Because their mouths, too, are sewn. They drift, not float. They press against walls that don't exist, leaving smudges of grief and bone along the edges of places no longer shaped by space. And when they turn toward you, because they do turn, you see what the thread has done. Some are stitched crudely, lips puckered like poorly patched fabric. Others are almost surgical, neat, reverent, as if someone believed the mouth was sacred even as they shut it. A few still bleed, but none speak. Not because they can't, because they won't. Not anymore. They tried once. Some of them screamed themselves raw. Some whispered through the stitches until their tongues unraveled like wet rope. Some used their teeth to bite the thread, to chew, to claw, to beg. And all it did was make the silence louder. So now they drift. They gather at the foot of your grave sometimes. Not every night. Just the ones where the sky is bruised and the moon looks like it's watching. They don't mourn you. They recognize you. You're one of them. Not yet fully. Not while your thread still holds. But enough. They see the pressure behind your sealed lips. The push of memory against the seams. They see your jaw shift in its sleep. They remember that feeling. They don't speak to you. They hum. A low vibration, like bees in a cathedral. It's not sound, not exactly. It's the idea of sound. Language without language. A voice that forgot how to be heard, but still remembers how to ache. You feel in your ribs, in the soles of your feet, in the back of your throat, where your first lie was born. One of them gets close. A woman, maybe, or something that used to be a woman. Her eyes are gone. Not hollow, just turned inward. She doesn't look at you. She knows you. She raises a hand. She traces a shape in the air. You recognize it. It's not a word, but it used to be. Then she fades like breath on cold glass. The others follow, one by one, into the dirt, into the dark, into the stories no one writes down. You are alone again, but you are never alone for long, because the stitched dead remember each other. They are bound, not by thread, not by death, but by the weight of all the things they never got to say. And you have so much left unspoken. When you sleep, if you can call it that, you dream of a great table, long as time, where all of you sit mouths closed, hands resting on what older than sin, and one by one, without ever parting their lips, they begin to speak, and you listen, because in the kingdom of silence, listening is the only way to scream. They say she walked barefoot, through frost, through plague, through the groaning breath of towns that had forgotten what hope sounded like. They called her a midwife, but she hadn't delivered a child in decades. What she delivered now was mercy. Sharp, cold, inconvenient mercy. She carried no satchel, no herbs, no crosses or oils or prayers. Just scissors, wrapped in cloth, wrapped in silence. She arrived only when the stitch was wrong, when the dead had something left to say, when the thread was too tight and the soul too restless. She came for you on a night when even the crows refused to land. The wind didn't howl. It watched. The stars did not shine. They turned away. She found your grave by instinct, not by map. She stood above you and did not weep. She listened, and in the hush of midnight, she heard it, that faint, impossible hum, pushing upward through the soil, the pressure of one syllable, struggling to be born. She whispered to the dirt, not prayers, not spells, just a name, yours, not the one the bishop cursed, not the one the town forgot, the one your mother gave you, before you learned what sin tasted like. And the ground softened, not opened, not cracked, softened, like a wound healing in reverse. She dug with bare hands, dirt packed under her fingernails like confession. She found your face, cold, slack, unforgiving, but not gone. She touched your lips, felt the thread, still tight, still coarse, still soaked in ancient vinegar. She didn't flinch. She unwrapped the scissors. They weren't iron, or silver, or any metal you'd recognize. They looked wrong, bent slightly, humming softly, like they'd been forged in a place where screams are currency and time bleeds slowly from the walls. She held them up, not to the sky. There was no moon to witness, but to your mouth, as if asking permission. And then, with the tenderness of someone delivering a child, she snipped. The first thread split like a breath held too long. The second pulled loose with a sound like tearing silk. The third unraveled itself, as if eager to be free. And your lips parted, not wide, just enough. She leaned in, close, so close you could feel the warmth of her breath on the corner of your cheek. She didn't flinch at the smell, or the rot, or the twitch of your tongue waking from its grave. She asked one thing, just one word. That's all she wanted. Not a story, not an accusation, not a curse. Just one. You gave it to her. You don't remember what it was. But she did, because when she stood, there were tears. Not many, just enough to wet the dirt on her chin. She kissed your forehead, not out of love, out of ritual. Then she turned and walked into the dark, and the grave closed behind her, slowly, as if unsure whether it wanted you back. You don't speak now, not yet, but the thread is gone, and your mouth is open, and the ghosts are listening, because sometimes all it takes to awaken a curse is a woman with scissors and a reason to remember your name. The house was not old, but it felt old, like it had inherited age from the ground it stood on. 3 rooms, no fireplace, a roof that sighed when the wind leaned too hard. It belonged to a family no one remembered. A farmer, his wife, and a boy with hands too delicate for work and a silence too heavy for his years. He was the first to hear it. It began at night, naturally, because whispers know when not to compete with daylight. A sound, not a voice, not yet, rising up through the floorboards like steam through cracks in a bathhouse. Soft, insistent, repetitive. The boy thought it was the wind, or the rats, or something in the pipes, though there were no pipes. But one night, after his parents had collapsed in his sleep like bags of damp flour, he pressed his ear to the floor, and he heard you. Not your name, not your voice exactly, but your shape, the shape of your breath, your vowels, your need. It was a whisper too smooth to be rodents, too rhythmic to be madness, too familiar to be ignored. He began to return to it, night after night, lying belly down on the cold wooden planks, ear pressed against the knots and dust, waiting, and you didn't disappoint, because now, unstitched, unrest, unfinished, you had something to say, not words, not yet, but the beginning of them, a rhythm, a cadence, the drumbeat of meaning before the march of language. And the boy, he began to hum along, softly, without knowing. At first, it was harmless. He repeated sounds he didn't understand. Patterns. Phrases with no source. He scrawled them in chalk behind the shed, in mud along the stream, in blood, his own, on the barn door one autumn morning. The town noticed. His father called it possession. His mother called it illness. The priest, after a brief inspection, called it deep sleep suggestion and prescribed fasting. But the boy was not fasting. He was listening, because your voice had reached him, through dirt, through death, through it soaked in the history of forgotten prayers. And each night, he answered, not with words of his own, he had none, but with yours. He spoke languages no one taught him, Latin, Aramaic, something older. He drew symbols in his soup. He refused bread. He stopped blinking when the church bell rang. And one night, in winter, when the frost had sealed every door in town with silence, he opened his mouth and said a name. Not his, yours. The house shuddered. The walls wept. The oil lamp extinguished itself with a hiss like a snake remembering its god. And beneath the floorboards, the whisper stopped, not because you were done, but because you had passed it on. And the boy, he never spoke again. Not in any language the town understood. He walked still, they say, near the cemetery, near the trees that leaned too far inward. Mouth open, whispering, not for madness, for memory. Because once a whisper finds a mouth, it never really leaves. It happened quietly, as these things do. No thunder, no omen, just a rusted shovel sinking into indifferent earth, and a pair of gloved hands reaching down into your long-forgotten bed. They called it a routine excavation. Construction ahead. Surveys required. No one expected bones. And certainly not yours. The archaeologist was young. Earnest. Carried her degrees like armor and her skepticism like a torch. She believed in context, in dating layers, in carbon, not in whispers, not in you. But the earth has a way of teaching patience, and you have a way of waiting. It took time. The shovel struck first. Metal on something not quite stone, not quite shell. That dull, unmistakable hollow sound. The noise of a mouth opening without lips. She crouched, brushed gently, dislodged centuries with a soft bristled brush, and a reverence she didn't quite understand. And there you were, your skull, not complete, but unmistakable, the jaw frozen in a crooked angle, teeth misaligned, a molar cracked, and most disturbingly, thread, still intact, still twisted like a spider's revenge, still still pulling fleshless lips into the faintest, cruelest mockery of silence. She didn't understand at first. She tilted her head, photographed it, measured angles. She wrote possible postmortem trauma. She meant someone did this on purpose. The cloth around the jaw had long since crumbled. The skin had disappeared like smoke. But the thread remained. And so did the feeling. She didn't talk about that part. Not in the report. The cold that crept in her knuckles the moment she uncovered your face. The way the wind stopped blowing, as if the air around her had been sealed off. Like a breath held too long. She had nightmares that night. Dreams of tight corridors, of mouths sewn shut with fishing line, of voices humming from inside walls that pulse like lungs. She woke with blood on her pillow. From biting her tongue, she told no one. Back at the site, she cataloged you. Labeled, tagged, filed. Skull fragment, male, 14th century, unusual mandibular suture. Unusual. That was the word she chose. Not cursed, not silenced, not speaking still. She boxed you in foam, sealed the crate, filled out the manifest. Destination, university archive. Climate controlled, dust free, safe. But safe for who? Because the moment she closed that box, something shifted. Her team reported whispers near the trench. Tools went missing. A digger claimed the soil was breathing. They laughed, of course. Called it fatigue, stress, too much coffee. She laughed too, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. And the box, the one with your skull, it began to rattle. Only at night. Only when no one else was in the room. Only when she said your name in her mind. The one she didn't know, but somehow remembered. She kept returning to the photograph, to the thread, to the jaw. She wondered what had been worth sewing shut. What kind of voice could survive this long, held together by spite and fiber and something deeper. She almost opened the box again. Almost. But then she heard it. From the floorboards beneath her bed. From the soil still clinging to her boots. From her own mouth as she dreamed in Latin she never studied. You. Not your voice exactly, but your presence. That heavy, humming thing that sits behind the tongue and waits for permission to be born. She never returned to the site. She changed careers, but sometimes, in quiet rooms, when the air thickens with nothing at all, she still dreams of your mouth. And in those dreams, you are smiling. Not kindly, not cruelly, just ready. You always thought death would be a door, a slow creak, a shaft of light, a moment of peace wrapped in incense and choral music. Or perhaps, if things had gone the way the priest promised, a corridor, white, endless, lined with apologies you'd never have to make. But instead, you were stitched, not sent, not guided, just tied, like a letter no one wanted to open, like laundry hung to dry in a storm that never ended. Your mouth was sealed not just to keep you silent, but to anchor you, because some believed the soul wasn't carried upward by wings, or downward by weight, but pulled, tethered by what remained unfinished. And you were all unfinished edges. You were the kind of soul that didn't float. You clung to breath, to voice, to sentence fragments that never got to fracture into meaning. So they stitched you shut, not to punish, to contain, to hold you down. Because if they left your mouth open, you might rise, not with grace, with fury. And so, the thread didn't just hold your lips. It held your place. You weren't buried into death. You were sewn into it, tethered to the underworld like a kite tied to a child who forgot how to let go. In Babylon, they believed the dead needed to drink, that the afterlife was a dry, bitter dust, and that offerings of water kept the departed sane. But no one offered you anything. Your mouth, after all, was closed. In ancient Egypt, they removed the tongue of the wicked and buried it in a separate jar. so it wouldn't speak in judgment before the gods. But yours is still with you, pressed against your teeth, swollen with all the things you never said. Somewhere beyond the veil, you feel the weight of the afterlife, but you never pass into it. You dangle, sewn to its threshold, mouth tethered like a cursed marionette, lips stitched into silence. But soul, oh the soul, aching to shout. Others pass by you in the dark. Some whisper, some scream, but none of them stay, because you don't move. You don't speak. You just are. And that's what makes them afraid. You've become a warning to the angels who look away, to the demons who hesitate, to the dead who still carry secrets they refuse to say aloud. You're proof that silence can be stitched, that sin can be packaged, that the dead don't have to be loud to be dangerous. But there's a tear now, small, insignificant to the untrained eye. One of the stitches has loosened, just slightly, just enough. The thread frays in your cheek. The taste of vinegar returns. Your jaw pulses. Your tongue flexes. The silence shifts in its chair. And somewhere in the afterlife, in whatever twisted architecture holds the damned and the forgotten and the cursed in adjacent rooms, something listens, because you are still sewn, but not still. You are still sealed, but not surrendered. You are sewn to the afterlife, but pulling against it now, thread by thread, word by word, curse by sacred, shattered curse. And when you tear free, there will be no trumpet, no flash of light, only your voice, old and hungry, slipping back into the world like a blade through silk. They always told you the soul leaves through the mouth. That's why they close it, not out of decency, not for appearances, but because the open mouth is a door, and some doors aren't meant to stay ajar. You die, and the breath escapes. Not just breath, the thing beneath the lungs, the part that dreams, the part that remembers. And if the mouth stays open too long, something else might find its way in, or out, or both. That's why, for centuries, they fear the open jaw. It gapes too wide, too still, too unnatural, like it's listening for something the living cannot hear. Because the mouth, your mouth, is not just flesh and spit and syllables. It is a portal, a crossing, a breach. In ancient Mesopotamia, they believed the soul exited through the mouth. And if it was left unguarded, demons could climb inside. Were your face like a forgotten name? In rural Poland, they placed coins in the mouths of the dead, not for payment, but to weigh the gates shut. In some old monasteries, the monks would whisper blessings into the mouths of corpses, not for the sake of the soul, but to seal the exit with sacred sound. But you were never sealed with prayer, only thread, rough, coarse, pulled tight by someone who believed too much and understood too little. They didn't just close your mouth, they locked it. They treated it like a cursed door that needed bolting from the outside. Because they knew your voice had power, not because it was loud, but because it opened things, old things, buried things, things with teeth. You once spoke a sentence that made a woman forget her husband's name. You whispered a phrase to a soldier, and he laid down his sword forever. It wasn't magic. It was clarity, and that's more dangerous than any spell. The mouth, they say, is the beginning of language, but it is also the end of silence. And silence is how they control things. Cities, kingdoms, people. So they shut yours. And in doing so, they try to shut the portal, try to close the loop, try to keep the world safe from what might come out if your lips ever parted again. But here's the thing they didn't consider. You were never the source. You were the funnel, a narrow path through which something older than sin flowed. A curse, perhaps, or a truth, or just the echo of a god who got tired of being worshipped and started whispering blasphemy instead. They close your mouth, but the portal was never just physical. It was in your absence. in the silence that thickened around your grave like fog, in the way children began speaking languages they never learned, in the way the church bells started ringing before anyone pulled the rope. Your portal is open again. The thread is rotting. The dirt has shifted. The hum is returning. And somewhere, in a house that still creaks with your memory, a woman wakes up speaking your name in reverse, her mouth bleeding, her eyes black with sleep. She doesn't know why, but she's heard the stories. She knows a mouth is a mouth, but yours was a door, and she's just walked through it. He still wears the robes, long after the plague ended, long after the names of the dead became illegible ink on brittle parchment. He keeps the robes, purple, weighted, stained to the cuffs, like armor against memory. He told them it was mercy. He said your mouth was dangerous, said the stitches were sacrament, said silence was the only salvation left for someone like you. And they believed him, because his hands didn't shake when he said it, because guilt wears many disguises, and his favorite one was certainty. But the robes never forgot. They hang heavier now. They itch in strange places. They smell faintly of vinegar and earth, as if the thread from your lips has woven itself into the fabric of his vestments. He dreams of you, not nightly. He's not that lucky, just enough to keep his bones from ever fully resting. In the dream, you're standing, unstitched, unsmiling. You say nothing, and that's what terrifies him, because he remembers your voice, the way it curved around truths like a scythe in tall grass, the way it didn't need to rise to be heard. You never shouted. You didn't have to. You whispered, and men grew pale. You whispered, and sins exposed themselves like mold in wet light. And when he had you silenced, when he watched the thread pass through your skin, he thought it would end. But guilt is not a wound. Guilt is a garden, and he's been watering it. Every confession he hears now sounds like yours. Every voice that trembles behind the curtain carries your cadence. Sometimes, when he opens the book of hours, the pages hum, a low vibration that feels like a throat clearing before a final word. He avoids the chapel at dusk. The shadows move wrong. They lean toward the altar. He stopped taking communion wine. It tastes like iron now, like blood held too long in the mouth. And the candle at the end of the nave, it flickers when he walks past. Not for draft, from recognition. He has considered confession. But who hears the sins of a man who ordered silence? He tries to forget your name, tries to replace it with scripture. But names are like seeds in fertile soil. They return, in sermons, in dreams, in the murmurs of dying men who clutch his hand and beg for the wrong absolution. He hears your name in their last breath. He hears it when the bell tolls, when the choir falters, when the wind slips through the cracks in the apse and hums in the voice of someone who no longer breathes. Your name, once spat in anger, now swallowed in fear. He knows what he did. He doesn't regret silencing you. He regrets that it didn't work, because silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of something waiting to speak, and your silence has grown teeth. It wasn't supposed to happen. There was no exhumation order, no ceremony, no candlelight vigil, just a shovel in the wrong hands, and the earth remembering where it hid you. The gravedigger wasn't even drunk that day, which made it worse. He was sober, humming, digging the plot for a merchant's wife who died too clean and too wealthy to be placed among the forgotten. He struck something too soon, felt the resistance of wood where there should have been more earth. Then came the crack, the give, the soft, hollow breath of the past saying, "Not yet." The casket had collapsed in on itself. Time does that. But you were still there. Mostly, the cloth had rotted. The skin had receded. But your mouth, still sewn, still clenched in that eternal expression of forced quiet. And your eyes, God help them. They were open, not bright, not wet, but open, clouded pearls staring through decades of soil, watching the sky like they'd been waiting to see it again. The gravedigger fell backward, as they do in stories. But this is not a story. He screamed, dropped the shovel, ran without speaking, his boots left behind in the mud, sucked clean off by the grave that had tasted him and let him go. By nightfall, the village knew, and they came. Of course they came. Not with prayers, with torches, with questions, with fear. They say one of the elders collapsed when she saw your face. Said she recognized the thread. Said her grandmother told her a story once about a man who cursed the bishop's wine and was buried like a demon to keep his voice from infecting the air. You became a myth in that moment. Not a man, a thing, a caution, a relic. They called the priest, not the bishop's heir. He'd gone mad years ago, choked on a rosary bead in his sleep. A new one, young, full of rules, but not enough ghosts to respect the old ones. He examined you, with gloves, with tongs, with disgust. He ordered you reburied, deep this time, farther from the others, outside the churchyard walls. No marker, no blessing, but someone didn't listen. A child, maybe, or a woman who remembered your name too clearly. Someone carved a symbol in a stone, placed it just above where they put you back. A circle, imperfect, a mouth, with no thread. Since then, things haven't been quite right. The wind stutters when it passes that corner of the cemetery. Candles blow out when they shouldn't. And sometimes, just sometimes, the bell tolls once in the middle of the night. Though no one pulled the rope, you are still there. But the grave is looser now. The soil doesn't press as hard. The roots have begun to give way. The stitches, too, have softened. One has snapped completely. You lie in your silence, no longer forced, but waiting, because they dug you up once, and they'll do it again. That's what they don't understand about graves. You don't bury history. You postpone it, and when it returns, it always brings the unfinished sentence back with it. Yours still hangs in the air, tasting of soil and vinegar and the weight of all the truths that were never meant to sleep forever. They thought it ended with dirt. That silence, once sown and buried, would settle, would rot like everything else. They thought your voice was a candle, snuffed, cold, irrelevant. But curses don't follow the rules of flesh. They do not dissolve. They travel. And yours, the one you spoke without speaking, the one whispered behind thread and linen and 6 feet of shame, still moves. It echoes not like thunder, but like a memory. You hear it in the bells. They ring wrong now, off rhythm, one beat behind the hour, as if the metal remembers a time that was stolen. Children flinch at the sound. Old men cross themselves in silence, eyes darting to the church walls like they expect them to bleed. And the birds? They don't nest near your grave anymore. Not since the ground shifted that spring. Not since the frost came early. Not since that little girl opened her mouth in a market square and spoke your name in perfect Latin, though no one had ever taught her a word of it. The butcher dropped his cleaver. The baker forgot how to knead. The priest turned pale and whispered. He's still speaking. They called it coincidence, anomaly, too much sun, not enough salt. But the truth gnawed at the corners, because they know, not consciously, not with logic, but in the bones. They feel your voice now like a draft beneath the chapel door, like the press of a hand on the shoulder when no one's there, like the sharp, copper taste of regret rising in the back of the throat during prayer. They whisper about you in taverns, only after the 4th drink, only when the fire has gone low, only in the tone used for half-truths and bedtime lies. They say your curse was never a word. It was a mirror, though when you spoke, people saw themselves too clearly. And some reflections are worse than death. One woman claims her son was born without a tongue. Another says her garden grows in perfect circles, no matter where she plants. A farmer swears his sheep bleed from the mouth every equinox. And that one of them, just one, whispers, they burned his barn, just to be sure. But it didn't stop, because the curse isn't in your body. It's not in the grave. It's in the air now. It's in the cough that doesn't leave, in the ink that refuses to dry, in the silence that thickens at the edge of sleep like fog on a battlefield. You didn't speak for vengeance. You spoke for truth. And truth doesn't die. It echoes, quietly, patiently, like breath behind a locked door. And now, centuries later, they still hear it. They don't always know what it is. A wind? A prayer? A thought not meant to be thought? But when it comes, they hold their tongues. They close their mouths. They turn their mirrors to the wall. Because somewhere deep in the soil, your voice is still unraveling. And echo by echo, it's making its way back. You weren't supposed to escape. Not hell. Not that place. Not the quiet, frozen rot you found beneath the veil. But you did. Or something did. You slipped out sideways. Not through fire or flame, but through a crack in the silence. Through the breathless space between one curse and the next. And now, hell notices. It's not angry. Hell, it doesn't do anger. Hell does accounting. And your name is still on the ledger. Scratched in with a stylus dipped in sins long buried under fingernails and sacrilege. A mouth sewn shut is supposed to stay shut. A sealed corpse is supposed to stay put. But here you are, mouth half-parted, thread rotting, voice humming beneath the grave like a violin strung with nerve. You were always a poor fit for that place. Too clever, too loud in your mind, too stubborn to let eternity finish your sentences. I'll try to hold you, not with fire, with repetition. You remember it. That long corridor of whetstone, the smell of mildew and sulfur and familiarity, the way the walls pulse like lungs that had forgotten how to exhale. No devils, no whips, just rooms, endless rooms, each one lined with mirrors, and every mirror showed the same thing. You, not as you were, but as you might have been, had you stayed silent, had you bit your tongue, had you bent instead of burned. You saw yourself holding a child. You saw yourself bowed in prayer. You saw yourself old, tired, forgiven. Hell's punishment wasn't fire. It was possibility. It made you walk past yourself 1,000 times. Each time closer to the version they wanted you to be. Each time further from the version who opened his mouth and let the world see. But you kept walking. You didn't weep. You didn't pray. You watched. And one day, without knowing how, you turned around, and the mirrors cracked, and the floor shifted, and something opened. Not up, not down, just away. And you stepped through, and hell noticed. And now it wants you back. You hear it sometimes, beneath the hum, beneath the whisper. A low, bureaucratic muttering from far below. A name repeated, a case reviewed, a file reopened. The world has changed since you left. But hell hasn't. It waits, patient, inevitable, like ink bleeding through parchment, like a debt. You were never forgiven. Not there, not here. You were leaked. And now, the hole you left is leaking too. The wind near your grave smells strange, burnt copper and ash. Clocks stutter, candles flicker blue, and in the silence of certain nights, dogs howl at nothing, then fall silent. As if they've been recognized. Something is coming. Not a beast. Not a demon. Something quieter. A summons. Hell doesn't take vengeance. It takes back. And you were never theirs to begin with. But now that you've spoken, now that your voice has begun to unravel from the seams of history, they remember why they wanted you stitched in the first place. You don't fear it, because fear is for the innocent. But you feel it. That pressure at the base of your spine. That breath on your cheek when no one is near. That familiar, rhythmic tap on the inside of your skull. A knock without a hand. They want you back. And the worst part? Part of you misses it. What if they never touched you? What if the needle, the thread, the coarse twine that pulled flesh into silence was never there? What if the stitches lived only in your mind, knotted together by fear, woven tight by the memory of what your voice once did? You can't remember the sewing. Not exactly. Only the sensation. A pressure, a tearing, a quiet, deep as burial. That began the moment you realized your words had gone too far. But no one ever showed you the thread. You never saw the needle. No blood. No sting. Just silence. Sudden and absolute. And a strange sensation that your mouth now belonged to someone else. So maybe, just maybe, the stitches were never real. Maybe they were a story they told you. Told everyone. Because a sewn mouth is easier to explain than a soul that simply refuses to speak. Maybe you weren't silenced. Maybe you chose silence. Because the truth you carried was too heavy for sound. Too sharp. Too much. And so you sealed it away. Threadless. Bloodless. Voluntarily exiled from your own throat. That's the worst kind of silence, isn't it? The kind you give yourself. The kind you convince yourself is protection. That if you don't speak, you won't be hunted. If you don't remember, you can't be punished. If your mouth is closed, maybe the world won't bleed when you open it. They whispered of your curse. They feared your voice. But what if they were never the ones who shut you? What if you did? And now, after years of dirt and dark, the silence begins to tremble. Not break. Not yet. Just loosen. And with it comes a question. If there were no stitches, what have you been tearing through all this time? Because the pain was real. The resistance. The sense of being sealed inside yourself. Like a prisoner trying to scream through walls made of shame. You've scratched at your own jaw. You've bitten your tongue in dreams. You've wept syllables that had no vowels. So something held you. If not thread, then memory. If not cloth, then fear. And now you're asking, if the stitches were never real, then who locked the door? And more importantly, who has the key? Because it's turning now. You feel it, don't you? In the soft click behind your teeth. In the pressure easing behind your ears. In the air, thicker now. As if waiting for something to be said. And you know, the moment you speak again, whether with voice or thought, or the kind of silence that bends the world, you will not sound like yourself. Because silence changes people. Even imagine silence. And a version of you who comes back. He will not whisper. He will name things. Out loud. On purpose. So maybe the stitches were never there. Maybe they were never needed. Maybe the world silenced you. Only because it was afraid of what you might say. When you finally stop pretending you were ever bound at all. It doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't crash like thunder or scream through stone. It doesn't tear through your throat with violence or pride. It comes back softly, like breath, like fog rolling down a hillside at dawn, like the memory of a lullaby that your mother hummed once before she forgot your name. Your voice returns like a trespasser. Careful, quiet, uninvited, but inevitable. The first sign is warmth, a faint tingling at the base of your tongue, as if the thread you imagined had kept it pinned for centuries, is finally starting to dissolve. Then comes a shift. Your jaw unlocks. Not a snap, not a break, just a gentle unfastening, like a door you never realized was bolted until it drifted open. The silence recoils, not from fear, from recognition, because your voice has been here before. It knows the path, knows how to slip between syllables, how to balance truth on a single consonant, how to shatter worlds with a word whispered into the wrong ear. You don't speak yet, but your mouth knows you will. Your lips part like flower petals remembering the sun. Your breath stirs dust in the grave. And suddenly the earth doesn't feel so heavy. The roots pull away. The worms detour. The coffin creaks with anticipation, because something ancient is stretching inside you. Not vengeance, not rage. Voice, the pure, aching need to name. To name what was taken, to name who took it, to name yourself. The first sound that escapes is not language. It's vibration, low, dark, the kind of sound felt more than heard. Like the hum beneath a cathedral, like the tension in a room before a truth is spoken. It reaches the surface. No one hears it, not with ears. But a dog in the village wakes and begins to whine. A child stirs, whispering your name in her sleep. The priest drops his rosary and forgets what he was confessing. The air around your grave thickens. The wind bends. A bell rings without being touched. You breathe again. Not air, not life, but intention. Your voice isn't just a sound now. It's a force. It presses outward into the cracks of things, into the brittle shell of the world that once tried to bury you under silence and shame. And as it rises, slowly, patiently, like smoke from a ritual fire, you realize you're not speaking alone. Other mouths have opened. Other voices long sealed are returning. Not loud, not yet, but enough. Enough to shift the dirt, to curl the leaves, to wake the old stories that never made it onto paper. You do not roar. You resonate. And resonance is more dangerous than rage, because rage burns out. But a voice can carry forever. And yours, your long-lost, long-feared, long-stitched voice, is coming back with the weight of centuries in its throat. It does not ask permission. It does not seek forgiveness. It only knows itself again. And that, finally, is more than enough. It wasn't meant to be spoken. Not aloud. Not fully. Not like that. The last curse wasn't words. It wasn't a spell. It wasn't even a sentence. It was the moment the air changed. The moment time paused. Just long enough for the world to shudder. Like something had remembered you. It happens in the grave first. The soil goes still. Not quiet still. Even the worms stop moving. Even the heartbeat of the earth itself seems to falter. Because the last curse isn't violent. It's absolute. It carries no anger. Only knowing. And what it knows is unbearable. It knows how they lied. How they rewrote your story. How they gave you the mask of the wicked. Because your truth was sharper than their faith. The curse doesn't scream. It reveals. It peels the skin off history. It lays bare the soft rot beneath every sermon, every confession, every grave built on fear. And it starts small. A crack in a church's altar. A priest who forgets the names of his saints. A crucifix that falls from the wall at dusk and lands not with a crash, but a sigh. They try to explain it. Of course they do. They say it's the humidity. They say it's structural. They say it's nothing. But they don't sleep anymore. The dreams have returned. The ones with your face, with your lips moving, though no sound emerges. Only light. Blinding, warm, terrifying light. Because the last curse is not a death sentence. It's a birth. The rebirth of a story that refuses to rot. The resurrection of your voice, now freed from all the language they tried to drown it in. It finds a body, not yours. That vessel is broken. That door is closed. But somewhere, in a child who hums in tongues she's never heard, in a man who weeps at dusk for sins he's never committed, the curse returns. It always finds flesh. It always finds form. Not to destroy, to remind. To remind the world of what it buried. To remind the silence of what it cost. To remind the faithful that not all heretics were wrong. Some were just early, and now the curse is blooming. Not like fire, like truth. Slow, inevitable, unstoppable. You don't speak it. You are it. You are the final phrase in a language that was never meant to survive. You are the breath between syllables, the ink between lines, the echo in a cathedral long since emptied of meaning. They sewed your mouth shut to keep hell at bay. But hell wasn't in you. Hell was in the lie that silence was safety. Hell was the fear of what one voice could unbury. And your last curse? Your final, irreversible offering? It's not damnation. It's clarity. It's a world forced to look at itself, without the mercy of forgetting, without the comfort of myth, without the stitches that kept the scream inside. You speak it now, not with lips, not with sound, but with presence. And all who hear it, truly hear it, are never able to lie to themselves again. It didn't happen during a war. No fanfare, no siege, no mob breaking stained glass with torches and righteous anger. Just a morning, gray and wet, the kind that slips between bones and makes you doubt the existence of warmth. The bells didn't ring, not because they couldn't, but because the ropes had frayed overnight. Inside the chapel, everything was still. The pews, the altar, even the flickering votive candles, for once, held their tongues. But something beneath the stone began to shift. The walls didn't crack. They exhaled, and in that breath came a sound. Not loud, not piercing, just a long, deep creak, like an old door finally deciding to open itself after centuries of polite refusal. They call it the day the church split, but it wasn't the walls that tore. It was the faith. The bones of belief snapped that morning, quietly, neatly, like dry twigs under velvet. It began with a whisper. A woman stood during morning prayer and said she heard a voice. Not God's, not a saint's, but yours. Calm, unshaking, carved in syllables that didn't belong to the Latin Mass. She said the voice was buried in the floorboards. Said it hummed like stone remembering fire. Said it called her by name, though she'd never spoken it in that place before. The priest told her to sit, to be still, to repent. She didn't. She placed her palm flat against the ground, against the centuries of wood rubbed smooth by kneeling men. And she listened, and others followed, not all at once, but like dominoes nudged by doubt. A finger here, a glance there, a silence stretching too long, until finally someone said it. He's still here. Not Christ. You, the one with the sewn mouth. The one they buried under doctrine and salt and official silence. And then the floor split. Not by magic, by memory. The foundation cracked not from weight, but from the pressure of unspoken truth trying to rise. Dust fell like snow from the rafters. A statue of St. Bartholomew blinked, once, and wept dark oil. And in the center of the nave, a jagged fracture opened like a wound. Some ran. Others dropped to their knees, not in worship, but in recognition, because they knew, not with the mind, but with the body. They felt the lie they'd lived in, felt the tremor of all the stories rewritten, felt the history under their feet awaken and stretch. The bishop, pale and sweating, declared a test, a demonic trick, but no one listened. His words bounced uselessly against the stone, flat and weightless, like trying to sew shut a windstorm, because the voice had already risen, not just yours, but theirs, all the silenced ones, the buried, the mocked, the erased, and the church couldn't hold it. Not the walls, not the hierarchy, not the shame-polished pews or gold-threaded sermons. The split was never in the floor. It was in them, a fissure between what they were told to believe and what they knew deep in the soft parts of the soul, the parts no scripture touches, but where every true word finds its root. They didn't rebuild. You can't rebuild a thing that was never whole. Now the building sits half abandoned, half prayed in. People come at night, not for mass, for silence, for that voice, the one that doesn't forgive, but understands, the one that doesn't ask for penance. Only truth. They kneel by the split in the floor. They place their palms on stone, and sometimes, just sometimes, they speak. And when they do, Their mouths do not bleed. Their lips do not seal. They are not punished. They are simply heard. So much has changed. The town no longer speaks of you in daylight. The records have been burned, rewritten, or locked away in drawers so deep they touch another century. And yet, beneath the earth, you remain. You're not a man anymore. Not exactly. Not the bitter breath, the fire-eyed heretic they warned about. Not the sinner they silenced with black thread and blessed cruelty. Not the cursed one who made the bells ring wrong. You are sediment now, myth pressed into the grain of time. Your bones, if they remain, have grown soft as chalk. But your voice, oh, your voice still clings to the soil like a memory that refuses to fade. It doesn't echo anymore. It vibrates, soft, continuous, like the hum of a world that finally understands itself a little better and hates itself for it. There's moss on your grave now, but the stone was never inscribed. Just that strange carved circle, unfinished, imperfect, a mouth half open. Visitors still come. Not often, but enough. Some leave coins. Others, strips of cloth. Small offerings. Not out of worship, but solidarity. Because they, too, have swallowed truths that curdled inside them. They, too, have been asked to shut up and kneel. And in your story, your silence, they hear something dangerous. Permission. Permission to speak again. To stop apologizing for the sound their soul makes when it remembers who it is. You were never meant to last. They've buried you to be forgotten. A warning. A wall. But the earth is terrible at keeping secrets. Every rainfall stirs your memory. Every root that burrows through your grave carries a rumor to the trees. And trees listen. So does the wind. So do the crows who perch on the chapel's rusted spire and scream at nothing. So do the children who dream in Latin. Though no one's taught them to conjugate. You remain beneath the earth, yes. But you're not buried. You are sown. And what you planted in silence is now blooming in noise. Not the kind that deafens. The kind that reveals. A low, resonant hum in the throat of the world. A voice unsown. A curse redefined. A truth that will not close its mouth. And so we end. Not with a scream. Not with a prayer. But with a breath. Because that's all you ever needed. Just one breath. To make the world remember. And now, it does. It always will. You may rest. But your story never sleeps.